Like I mentioned at the end of the previous episode, this week we'd be working on the rear wheel. But before we get to that, I wanted to give you an update on the pedals, which you can see the Evapo Rust did a great job on. We're going to try to get a little bit more grease in the bearings. Didn't damage that at all. And I wanted to give you an update on the parts that I was able to source from the local bike shop. That's what's happening on this episode of Featherstone Bicycles. If you recall the list that I showed last week or the week before of all the parts that either were missing or needed replacing, the first was the Cool Lemon, new old stock, Cool Lemon Hunt Wild Schwinn approved handlebar tape, which I was able to find at a swap meet recently. So we have that. The chrome handlebar plugs that keep the edge of the tape in place. I actually already had those. The reflectors for the pedals. I thought that the bike shop had a lot of these of this style. They have a lot of these reflectors. They did not have any that had this particular style that fit in to the pedals. So just cleaning these up. They are all together. They are all in one piece. One has a little bit of a crack on it. I'll probably put a little super glue on that, and that will be fine. The things I was able to get from the bike shop was the correct nut and bolt for the seat tube post. And if you recall, the old hardware had the wrong kind of nut on the back. It was a square nut. And as the cable housing for the rear brake was riding over that point of that nut, it tore this cable housing apart completely. So the right nut looks like this, and it has a hex nut, but then there's a piece, a section in the back that's basically a slotted groove. So the cable is actually supposed to ride in that groove. And so I was able to find a piece of cable housing that they had that fairly matches the color. And it's a little lighter, but can't be really choosy about that. And then this is the right kind of bolt that has a slot, one slot in it, or one little protrusion on it that fits in the slot on the housing here that holds the or the support that holds the brake cable. And then the last thing, well, not the very last thing, but the last thing I was able to get from the bike shop was a seat that was correct for that period. It's pretty dirty and it's kind of rusty on the bottom for the tool bag straps and the hardware here, but that's going to clean up. I was able to just rub that out a little bit with a rag and saw that the actual vinyl is in great shape, and there's no tears in it anywhere, which, remember, the old seat had a lot of cracks in it. And it does have the Schwinn approved comfort seat, I guess it says. Some of that's gone, but that badge is still in place. So this is a much more correct seat for that era. And then the only other thing that was on the list was new tires, tubes, and rim strips, which I actually already had for a 27 by 1.25 tire and rim. So we're all set to go. I used my marine grease, which is a water-resistant grease that I use for re-greasing new parts on the bicycles. Works well. And I used a little pick, just dipping it in the grease and getting it in the crevices here on the pedals. The evapor rust did not damage that at all. Was riding a little bit rough, but it's 51-year-old grease in there. So just by working it in with the tip of the pick, both sides here and at the bottom, I was able to get it running smooth again. So did that, and now we're going to heat up our reflectors so we can get those popped back in. Got gloves on, so I'm not burning my hands off. So the pedals are all done now. One of the things I like to do with axles and other parts that have a lot of pieces that go together in a certain order is to take it all apart in that order, lay it out, take a picture of it, so that after I've cleaned all the pieces, I can then put it back together in the right order. To do that for this rear axle, this cone nut and lock nut are pretty well stuck on this side of the axle. So to solve that, I'm going to use this little tool from Park Tool. This is does not have a number on it, so I don't know what it is. But basically, it's for putting in a vise. It's got two different axle sizes on it, and hopefully you can see that it's threaded, so you don't damage the threads. So you put it in the vise like that, put your axle down in there, tighten it up. Now I've got my cone wrench here, and then got that the other way around. 15 goes on the cone, and then the 16 goes on the lock ring, and I can start turning that. We're ready to start taking the wheel apart. So we've got this spoke guard, and then we'll take these incredibly old and badly in need of replacement tires off. They're going to pull right out. The rim strip is probably not in great shape, and like I said, I've already got a new set. Regular viewers of the channel will know that when I get to this part of unscrewing the spoke nipples or screwing them in, I've always mentioned that there is a tool, and actually it's like a drill bit, that you can see that there is a slot for a screwdriver, but then there's a little hole in the middle. And this tool or this bit looks like the end of a screwdriver, except that there's a point sticking out in the middle that would fit in that hole and allow the bit to stay in place while you use a power drill to either screw them on or screw them off. And I've always talked about the fact that someday I'm going to get that bit, and of course I still haven't done it. However, I got a comment the last time I mentioned it from a viewer. I think he's a subscriber. His name is Barney Van Nykirk, and apologies, Barney, if I'm getting that name pronounced incorrectly. But he sent me a comment, and he said that is take an old screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and grind down the sides of it, leaving a point in the middle, and then cutting it off and using whatever I need as to fit into a drill and use it as a bit. Well, I've done that before. I tried that trick. However, I didn't read you all of what Barney said in his note. What I tried to do was using my bench grinder, which has, a pretty big wheel here. In Barney's note, he said to use a baby grinder, which I just happen to have this Dremel tool with what I would call a baby grinder. All right, so I've got my old screwdriver in place in the vise, and I've got my Dremel with my grinding stone on it, and we're going to give this a shot. Put this up close. You might not be able to see it, but the problem I was running into is that this grinding stone is curved. Looks like a gumdrop shape almost. And even though I was tilting it up, I really couldn't get a straight edge on the flat parts that I needed. You can see they slope up a little bit. Now, I did grab a spoke with a nipple on it, and it does fit in there, and it works, but it's not exactly the way it should be. So I have another, what appears to be a grinding stone. This was a Dremel kit, and there's a million different parts and bits that came with it, so I don't know if this is even for this purpose, but I've never used it before, and I'll probably never use it again, but it does have a very straight edge on it, so we're going to give that a whirl. Okay, kind of holding it steady was the hardest part, but I think you can see now that looks pretty close to what that bit looks like, and it fits in there pretty good. As I said, I think Barney is a subscriber, and if you're a frequent viewer and you're not a subscriber, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe. It's free. It's weird that YouTube uses the word subscribe. A lot of people think because of that word, it costs money to subscribe. It doesn't. You just are following the channel, and then you'll be able to see when new episodes are posted. The bit looks pretty good, so we'll get to work on taking this wheel apart. The wheel all apart. Before I get started on the rim, I'm going to take the hub, which is very greasy on the inside. Hopefully, nope, not quite. Plan B. Plan B, that jar that I had still has the chain soaking in the solvent. So I've got this in the bowl now, and I'm going to use my Zep Fast 505 and pour a bunch in here to fill that all the way up. So I think maybe the last thing we'll do today is get the rust off of this rim. And longtime viewers of the channel will know that the way we do that is we have a little soapy water, and then I've got a brush, wire brush bit on my drill here, and we'll just get started. It's amazing how these old wheels, no matter how bad they look, rusted out, that method really shines them up. There is a little bit of pitting there, so that just is black. Nothing I can really do about that. So it's time to hang this one up, let it dry, and we'll work on the other stuff. On the next episode, we'll clean up the rest of the parts. That's a spoke guard, the spokes, spoke nipples. I've already cleaned the ball bearings for the axle. I'm going to put the axle and the freewheel in the same solvent that I've got the hub working in over there, and then we'll clean up the skewer, and then we will put it all back together. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for sticking with me. Remember, you yourself can make a difference in your community, so check out the link in the description for this video for an Army of Normal Folks podcast. I think you'll enjoy it. Until next time, I hope to see you next week on Featherstone Bicycles.